If you're new to travel loyalty programs, you might not have thought about the fact that the value of your points and miles can go down. In this video, I'll tell you about 3 things that could negatively affect the value of your points and some best practices that you can follow to minimize the risk to you. So let's start off with devaluation. This is when airlines and hotel chains decrease the value of their points, typically by increasing the number of miles or points that it takes to book a flight or hotel. This is just like inflation in the regular economy, but in the travel industry, these price increases in terms of points can be very dramatic. For example, Marriott made a change to how you use their points in March of 2022. I looked at the prices of some hotels before and after that change, and I found that the Wailea Beach Resort in Maui went from 50,000 points up to 100,000 points for one night. While not all increases are this large, hotel chains tend to have a certain time each year when they will adjust the cost in points to book their hotels. Airline devaluations tend to happen at more sporadic times. United Airlines, for example, increased the cost in points of their international flights in mid-2023, which came as a bad surprise because people weren't necessarily expecting a devaluation at that time. In addition to devaluations, you also have to be aware that the things that you can book with your points can also change. Due to the pandemic, airlines stopped flying a number of planes that were quite popular for people to redeem their points for. EVA Airways stopped flying their Hello Kitty jets to international destinations, and Etihad stopped flying their A380s that have their famous showers in first class. While these flights are being brought back to some extent, one of the Hello Kitty planes was permanently retired, so you can now no longer experience it. Another thing to know is that when people pick an airline that they want to accumulate frequent flyer miles with, they often account for the fact that these miles can be used to book flights with those airlines' partners. But this can change at any time. For example, the Russian airline Aeroflot is part of SkyTeam Alliance, which means that normally you would be able to use Aeroflot miles to book flights on SkyTeam Alliance partners such as Delta and vice versa. But due to the war in Ukraine, this has been suspended. Additionally, Aeroflot is no longer able to fly to many of the destinations that it flew to in the past. So, people with Aeroflot miles are now going to have a much more difficult time using them. These types of financial struggles are definitely something you want to watch out for if you have many miles and points with any one company, but you also need to be aware that airline partnerships can change even without these warning signs. For example, in 2021, Emirates stopped allowing people to use miles with its airline partners to book its first class. This means that people who had been saving up miles in certain loyalty programs now have one fewer option for luxury travel in the Middle East. As an example of a similar thing happening to hotels, MGM and Hyatt ended their partnership, so MGM hotels will no longer be bookable with Hyatt points. Another risk to your miles and points is that a company can decide to get rid of its loyalty program, or the company itself can cease to exist. A recent example is that in October of 2022, Uber completely got rid of its loyalty program, and anyone who didn't redeem their points for things like Uber ride coupons just lost those points. An example of a loyalty program that disappeared when the airline went bust is Aloha Airlines. Based on my research, Aloha Airlines declared an end date to their loyalty program, after which their miles could no longer be used. People who had used their miles to book a flight on Aloha Airlines' partner, United Airlines, still had a valid ticket and could fly. But there would be a problem if you had used your miles for a flight on Aloha Airlines and that flight was no longer happening. From what I could read, most of these people did eventually get rebooked for free onto either Hawaiian Airlines or United Airlines. Before you start freaking out about bankruptcy announcements in the travel industry, you should know that in most bankruptcy situations, the company is able to either reorganize and then come out of it with its loyalty program largely unaffected, or it can get bought out by another company, after which the loyalty programs will usually get merged. For example, in 2013, US Airways merged with American Airlines. After that, the US Airways loyalty program got absorbed into the American Airlines loyalty program. Before the merger, US Airways was part of Star Alliance, which meant that you could use their miles to book flights on Star Alliance partners such as United Airlines. After the merger, you could no longer use the miles for flights with Star Alliance partners, but you could use them for flights on One World Alliance partners such as British Airways and Japan Airlines. The loss of redemption partners is definitely negative for some people, but the new redemption partners could also be a positive for some other people. A similar thing to what happened to US Airways that currently affects me is that Asiana Airlines, where I have a lot of miles, is being acquired by Korean Air. Unless the merger gets blocked by regulators, I'll likely lose the ability to use my Asiana miles on flights with their Star Alliance partners, but I'll likely gain the ability to use them on Korean Air's SkyTeam partners. In the hotel industry, when Starwood merged with Marriott, Starwood points were converted into Marriott points. In some ways, this increased the usefulness of those points because you could now use them at more hotels around the world. There are other things about the new loyalty program that some Starwood preferred guest members didn't like, but that's a little bit outside of the scope of this video. Now let's talk about some best practices for dealing with these risks to your points and miles. The first best practice is to use your points and miles shortly after you get them, rather than save them for long periods of time. You never know when the next devaluation is coming, or something else could happen that makes your points unusable for the travel that you originally wanted to book. Saving points for a vacation is not the same as saving money for a vacation, because when you save points, you're at the mercy of the company that your points are with. If something ever happens to you when you're traveling and you're offered a refund or compensation as either points or as cash, know that cash is the less risky option. The second best practice is to prioritize earning and keeping points that are transferable rather than points with any one specific airline or hotel. For Americans, this means earning credit card points with someone like Chase, American Express, or Capital One. That way, if an airline or hotel chain devalues their points, you still have the option of transferring your points out to a different loyalty program, or even using it directly in that credit card issuer's travel portal. A third best practice is to not buy or transfer points that you don't need yet. Sometimes you'll see offers to buy points at a huge discount and think that you'll be able to use these points to book travel in the future that costs more than the price that you paid. But I would caution against doing this unless you happen to immediately be using those points, because the longer that you hold on to points, the more likely it is that something could happen and decrease their value. I know that this video was about a topic that many of us would not like to think about, but if you found this video helpful, I'd appreciate if you let the like button know, and do consider checking out my videos about cool travel experiences that points and miles can get you.